We've got people signed up from Spain, Belgium, Germany, as well as everywhere, all across the UK. So it's fantastic to see so many people here, and hopefully it's going to be really fascinating. Unfortunately, there's been Amelia's had some slight technical difficulties, so it doesn't look like Amelia's going to be able to join us, which is a shame, but it's not a problem because we've got enough speakers as it is anyway. And some very, very fantastic, interesting speakers. So Thomas is here as well, if you want to give us a wave, Thomas. So we're going to, each of the speakers are going to speak for a little bit, and then we're going to get straight into some questions. So if anyone has any questions, please send them to Thomas. He'll pass them on to me. And we'll do it that way. It just keeps it nice and clean. And if everyone can sort of stay muted throughout, just makes it a little bit cleaner. That would be fantastic. We were going to have Amelia speak first, but in that case, we'll have Richard speak first, if that's okay. So if you're ready to go, Richard, you want to introduce yourself and things like that? That'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Wilson. I'm chair of Leeds for Europe. I'm also vice chair of the European Movement UK, and I'm a member of Leeds Green Party. I'm actually standing in Roundhay in the local elections in May. What does Brexit mean for young people in the north? Well, as you can see, I'm not young, so I'm going to not necessarily hit the nail on the head with that, but I think there's some general themes that I'd like to talk about, and they certainly will be relevant to young people. Because if you listen to Boris Johnson, you could be forgiven for thinking that he got Brexit done, and so this discussion is going to be a historical discussion about what Brexit did to young people in the north, as if it was all in the past. The point I really want to make tonight is that Brexit is not an event, but it is part of a much larger, longer running process, which has really only just completed its first phase. To use an analogy, Brexit was a battering ram with which the Brexiters have broken through the defences which were protecting us from them imposing on us their vision of our futures. That battering ram started to do its damage on the day of the Brexit referendum on the 23rd of June 2016. At that point, I think most people in the country thought that the act of breaking down the door with that battering ram was the object of the exercise. In other words, to leave the EU was the object of the exercise. But they didn't really have much idea of what was going to happen once that barrier had been broken down and we came out the other side, or they possibly had a jumble of different conflicting ideas about what that was going to mean. Now that the door has been battered down by that battering ram, the Brexiters are swarming through and are starting to attack the structures which people like us are desperately trying to defend. And I'm going to talk about a few of those in a moment. Now, why is this of significance for young people in the north? Well, one undeniable fact is that young people have more of a future than us oldies. So Brexit is going to have repercussions for a longer period of time for young people than for the older population. And it does seem that a lot of the measures that the government is now turning its attention to are going to have a disproportionate effect on the young and their futures. This is things like leaving Erasmus, like building new coal mines, like removal or watering down of workers' rights, or stupid culture war stuff like rewriting the national curriculum to make it more positive about the British Empire. More generally, this is taking place alongside a parallel drive towards authoritarianism, which is mainly aimed at embedding this government and its values into UK society. So we're talking about the government wanting to neuter the BBC. They've shut down Parliament at least once. They want to reduce the power of the courts to constrain the government. They're using the civil service as a pro-Conservative Party propaganda machine. They never take responsibility for anything, and they lie endlessly. Now, most of this would have been unthinkable before Brexit, but the frenzy of nationalism and division which Brexit has whipped up has made the unthinkable thinkable. Many of Brexit's advocates had this exact scenario in mind when they campaigned for it. They wanted to galvanise the section of society which had an inbuilt but largely dormant tendency to support authoritarian, nationalistic, conservative measures. And these people, who tended to be older people, but not exclusively, they made a coalition of mainly wealthy, middle-class, Southern English, traditional conservative voters, and they welded to that some Northern working-class, sort of new Tory voters. They put those together and they fused them together with Brexit. Now, Boris Johnson and his gang are determined to keep pouring petrol on that fire, to keep that coalition alive and keep it bubbling along on the hob. Now, Brexit was designed specifically to appeal to many, although not all, older people, because it is based on nostalgia for a past England which isn't coming back. It's aimed at mainly at people who don't like progressive change. They might like change if it's to take things back to how they were, but they're not so keen on change which is moving us forward. It's largely targeted at people who want to hold on to what they've got, which they may feel that they have earned, or that maybe they have earned, and not give it away. And it's for people who are generally settled and don't particularly want to live, study, work abroad. The fact is, most young people didn't vote for Brexit, and they didn't vote for this Conservative government. Most young people are very unlikely ever to warm to Brexit or this Conservative government, and Boris Johnson knows that. But he doesn't need young people, because I've just described the people that he's relying on. He doesn't particularly need a huge number of Northerners. He's got sort of what he needs from us. So he's comfortable with the current electoral situation, where he has the solid support of mainly English, rural, Southern voters, topped up with a few people from other parts of England. The opposition parties are divided and haven't worked out how to construct their own coalition of voters, and this has left them unable to decide how to oppose Brexit and the radical programme that is following it. So don't expect this government to deliver for the young or on levelling up the north. They have very little interest in making low-paid jobs more secure, in improving education, in reducing or eliminating tuition fees, in creating opportunities to live, study and work abroad, in providing quality, affordable housing, tackling climate change, or addressing inequality, because these things matter mainly to young people, but they don't matter to a government which has secured its power by stoking up and pandering to attitudes which we thought we had left behind. So as I say, Brexit is a battering ram which has cleared the way to the shoring up and the strengthening of entrenched privilege, wealth and power, predominantly held by the older population and the Southern English population. And I am sad to say that this has been to the detriment of young people and those of us who live in the north.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Richard. Just a very quick reminder before we move on, if you've got any questions that pop into your head that you want to put to our speakers, please send them through to Thomas, whose name is questions here. We'll go on to Molly next, if that's okay, Molly.
Yeah, thanks. And hello, everybody. It's nice to see you. It'd be nice to come back to Yorkshire one day. I imagine that will be possible. Hope you like, I'm coming to you from the Shire. Actually, it's Gloucestershire, but I hope you like my Hobbit house. So obviously, I'm the economist on the panel, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the economic costs of Brexit, but I'm going to talk about where we might go from here. And hopefully I've got a little bit more hope than Richard, but I absolutely don't sell false hope. And where we're going from here is quite a long road, I think. But anyway, firstly, the sort of incredible amount of very bad economic news, which is sort of relentless and actually a lot of it just doesn't get reported. Phenomenally bad stuff happening every day. I started that whole campaign when I was an MEP to get the Brexit impact studies released. And yeah, eventually we went to court and then Labour picked it up and they had that honourable address or whatever it was. We never saw the economic impact case studies. And obviously we know why that is, because it would have convince people to choose a second vote and decide not to go ahead with Brexit. But now we're seeing the real consequences, the real economic consequences, and they are devastating for us all, but I would say particularly devastating for young people. And what you have lost most is your ability to travel, study, fall in love, form relationships right across this amazing continent of Europe. And most people didn't realize they were losing that, because freedom of movement was always discussed in one direction only. It was those bloody X coming over here. You know, it wasn't about the fact that actually lovely people like Terry came here, obviously, but also that we used to travel there. You know, my life has been spent free in my continent, at least since we joined the European Union when I was 9 or something like that. And that right and privilege has been taken away from young people, and it's an absolute scandal. And you should be more angry about it, and we should all make a lot more noise about it, because it's been missold as an advantage for the country and as a one-way street when it was actually a precious reciprocal right. Now, some of the industries that are being damaged by Brexit might not be of much interest to you. I don't know if anybody here fancies going into fisheries, you know, which was made a huge deal of, but Leeds, of course, is a big centre for finance, and Bristol, that I represent, and Bournemouth also have a lot of finance jobs. The impact of Brexit on the finance industry was always going to be devastating, and it has been devastating. I remember addressing a group of bankers and financiers in Bristol in the middle, or like the autumn of 2017, so a whole year after the Brexit vote. And I explained to them the difference between passporting and equivalence and what the sort of trades they were going to lose. And I could see people in the audience visibly going white at the thought of the job losses. And yet everybody lied about that. And those job losses are going there. Maybe you don't want to work in the finance sector, but it's a sector that employs a lot of people in this country, and there's a lot of money being lost. Two industries that may be of more immediate appeal are the gaming industry, not actually making money through doing games, playing games, but through designing games, and the music industry. Both of those also being decimated. Access is being lost to the gaming industry, and I'm sure you've heard about the real problems musicians are facing touring because of the ending of freedom of movement. Then we've got a massive swathe of stuff to do with the Green New Deal and green investment, which we're losing a significant portion of. The Green New Deal in Europe is approximately €1 trillion. In this country, the Green Plan is £3 million. So, and incidentally, in the US, it's 2 trillion. So you can see the sort of scale of investment that we would have been a part of, and we won't now be a part of. And similarly, the European Investment Bank, a lot of the green investment from that bank came to the UK, and it funded actually our offshore wind industry. In fact, off the sea in your part of the world, in the North Sea. Where's that money going to come from now? This pathetic proposal for a sort of infrastructure fund in no way makes up for what we've lost. I could go on here, but I obviously could go on all night about this, but I'll just say one last thing. You see so many problems at the border, and they're being masked now by COVID, and they're being lied about by the government. But the ability to move goods in and out of the country has been really restricted and made a lot more complex and expensive. And for that reason, the Green Party has adopted a position of rejoining the customs union already. And that was a little bit bold in a way, but I think that would solve some of the problems that we're facing. Obviously, feel free to come back and ask me more about this when we get to the questions. Because I wanted to talk a little bit more about plans and where we might go from here. Well, actually, this is called What Next in 2021. And I'm afraid the first word I have here is chaos. And we're already seeing chaos. And that's the result of the government's deceit about what Brexit would mean. And instead of admitting that they lied or they made a mistake, they're now blaming the EU and adopting an aggressive posture towards the EU. And that can only lead to greater chaos. And I would say the chaos is also caused by the fact that Labour haven't opposed this. They haven't performed the role of opposition and effectively improved on what the deal might have been. They were too afraid of their voters to do that. And so, you know, we've had the worst possible outcome in terms of the kind of Brexit we've got. So we've got to make sure that the government owns this Brexit. We've got to make sure they don't get away with these lies that the problems we're seeing are teething problems or somehow caused by COVID. We've got to make this Boris Johnson's Brexit and make him own all the chaos that we are suffering and that we're going to continue to suffer. And we've got to point out the sort of things we're missing out on, like I just did with the Green New Deal, but all sorts of other exciting programs and opportunities that will come down the tracks that will not be available in the UK because of Brexit. And lastly, you would expect me to say that Richard didn't say this. We both work with the European movement, and I think it's the right thing. I think it's the right vehicle. It was the vehicle that was actually founded by Winston Churchill that supported taking us into the European Union, and I believe it'll be the vehicle that takes us back into the European Union. But at the moment, it's a little bit stuffed full of old white men. So if that doesn't describe you, please do join up and make the European movement more diverse. So the last bit is about when can we start the campaign to rejoin, and what does the route back look like? Actually, rejoining is quite a complicated matter, and I don't think we should sort of fool ourselves about that. It's going to be a long, slow process now, and obviously that makes me very sad. It gives me a reason to carry on living, I've got to say, as if I didn't have others, which I do. But it does make me sad, but at the same time, I think it kind of gives us opportunities as a country to do things we should have done long ago, like facing up to our colonial past, you know, and the rottenness of our colonial past. So many people in this country think that was a golden time, and they somehow think that the Indians enjoyed the empire as much as we did, and we'll just say, oh, we're tilting to Asia now, and they'll all say, yeah, the Brits are coming back. You know, this complete fantasy of what the empire was really like. It's time we relearned that, and we're going to have to relearn that now. And that, to me, is one good thing that's going to come out of Brexit. And yeah, people are going to have to learn what the European Union was really like. You know, that when they were told, we'll get a trade deal in an afternoon, it's the simplest thing ever. And all those lies are unraveling now. And we have to keep ramming home, actually, this is what the European Union is. It was as we said. You know, I told you so, actually, tattooed on my forehead now, but you can't see it because it's under my fringe. But no, you know, we have to be clear about what the European Union did offer and what we've lost. But I don't, you know, there are a lot of hurdles to cross before we can even think about seriously proposing rejoining the European Union. And to me, there would be no point in proposing it unless we had a sort of stable 10 or maybe even 15-point lead in terms of people wanting to rejoin. And to be honest with you, we are not anywhere near that yet. But in the meantime, we have to keep very close relationships with our European neighbours. You know, Richard and I are working on that with the European movement, because the sort of relationships, the diplomatic relationships, are absolutely appalling now. And that's obviously a dangerous thing. It's a damaging thing, but it's a thing that will also make it more difficult for us to return to the European Union. And, you know, Terry, I'm sure we'll talk about the great work she's doing, keeping relationships strong, but we have to make sure that our young people still have the chance to travel and to explore the continent that they're a part of. And that's a job for all of us in our communities, through twinning organisations, through working with schools, through those very local connections that we need to rebuild, because they happened naturally when we were EU members and they don't anymore. But obviously the most important and cheering note is what Richard said. Young people want to be members of the European Union. So every year we're closer to making that a reality. The demographics is on our side. And when I burst into tears standing next to Terry in the European Parliament on that very sad day just over a year ago, you know, I said I expect I will be back in this chamber. And obviously, you know, I'm not tempting fate by saying how long I'm going to live, but I genuinely believe we will rejoin the European Union. And I'm really looking forward to the day when Terry and I are in tears again. So please do what you can to make that happen. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Molly. Just one thing again, keep sending your questions in to Thomas. It has questions here. Apparently we've got some viewers on Facebook as well. So if anyone who's watching on Facebook wants to pop some questions in the comments, then Tom will pick those up. He didn't know that was what he was going to be doing, but he does now. Terry, are you okay to speak now?
Absolutely. Thanks, Marcus, and thanks for the invitation. I'm super happy to be here. And I was just thinking about it. I think I've actually never been to Leeds, but I have been to a lot of other places in the north. And I think that, you know, it's probably the part of the whole of the UK that is closest to my home area. I come from the beautiful Ruhrgebiet, from Gelsenkirchen. If anybody of you is into football, I think the only famous thing that comes from Gelsenkirchen, apart from coal, is Schalke 04. So that's a little bit my background. And obviously I have now been working together with Molly, but also together with a lot of other people on Brexit. And and what it means in general. But I think more specifically for young people, and Molly and Richard have already said a lot of things about the background and where Brexit came from, but I think it's always important to state first and very firmly that obviously young people did not want Brexit, that the majority of young people voted against Brexit, and that yes, many chances, especially of young people, will be lost, the ability to study, live and work easily in the rest of the European Union. I found the moment when the Conservative Party sent out the share pic on Twitter that, you know, like in this super triumphant, now we are ending freedom of movement tone. This was really the moment for me where I completely lost it, because I think if you tell people in Germany that this is something that you should celebrate, that you are ending freedom of movement, people tell you that you are insane, because it's one of the best things, obviously, that the European Union brings to people, and especially to young people, because we know also from statistics that a lot of young people are more likely to move, also due to a wonderful program, the Erasmus program, that also because of the decision of the UK government is now not going to be available to young people and all people in the UK anymore, which I think is something that shocked not only a lot of members of the European Parliament, but also a lot of people in the UK. And it's one of these issues where chances of young people are going to be less now with Brexit. But I would also like to second what Richard has been saying, because I think it goes far beyond freedom of movement and Erasmus, what Brexit will mean for young people, because we already see that there is an agenda of deregulation, the whole question of social and employment rights, also when it comes to environmental protection, when it comes to climate change, and all of these deregulation policies are going to affect young people disproportionately more. So there is a lot to be lost, and the dangers are especially high for young people. But, and this is my third point and my last point already, I think that a lot depends on what we are going to do now. I really believe that Brexit is not over, and that this is a story that is told to us, so that things can now happen, you know, somewhere in the back room, without democratic participation in it. Also, when we look at the Brexit deal that is on the table now, if we look at the governance structure of this deal, it is very much focused on the executive. And this is something that from the European Parliament is, I think, going to be one of our main battles in the next weeks. As you know, we have not yet ratified this deal, so we still have a certain level of leverage, at least unilaterally, to ask for more participation, for more parliamentary oversight, and for more involvement of civil society, obviously, in the then actual implementation of this deal, because I don't think that this is going to be a silent deal, that this is just going to work. And we can already see this now. The withdrawal agreement has been signed just over a year ago, and we already see that it's a very bumpy road, that there are a lot of difficulties in the actual implementation. And with the Brexit deal and the much broader scope that it has, because it's not only about trade relations, it's also, for example, about police and judicial cooperation. There are going to be a lot of problems ahead, and we want to make sure, at least from the EU side, to have the Parliament involved in this, but also obviously civil society. And our hope is a little bit, but this is going to be a struggle then on the UK side, if we can make that happen. So if we can have more influence on, for example, the Partnership Council from the EU side, that this will also give you on the UK side more leverage, so that you can influence the UK government on the way how this deal is eventually going to be implemented, and how certain problems are going to be overcome and solutions can be found to certain things. Now, this, I think, is the first thing that is really ahead of us. As you know, we are in the middle of the scrutiny process. I can also tell you that the atmosphere in the European Parliament in the beginning, when we started scrutinizing, I felt was more positive than it is now, because we have already found a number of stumbling stones in this deal, but also because of the behavior of the UK government with regards to the Northern Ireland Protocol. A lot of colleagues are saying, why should we now vote for another deal if the deal that we have just signed is already being disregarded by the UK government? So this is a little bit the feel that we have, but obviously we are still in a process there, and we hope that somehow solutions can be found to the issues at hand right now. But then secondly, and this is something that we are already preparing for from our side, and there also, I think the UK-EU friendship group comes in 4 years, there is going to be a review of this deal. And we already know that from both sides, we want to put pressure on certain things that have not been included, like, for example, the Erasmus program, but also certain areas that are completely missing in this deal, like cooperation on foreign and security policy, but also other fields. So I think we should already start thinking now from the side, obviously, of the political level, but also from civil society, what we want to ask for and what we want to push for this review in 4 years, because I think there is going to be a political momentum potentially to change something. And then the third point I wanted to make, and there I can only support what Molly said in the end, now it is more important than ever to keep conversations going, to keep the bridges up, because a lot of things will become much more difficult to do. A lot of cooperation is going to be much more difficult to do. And I'm not only talking about the bureaucracy when it comes to business relations, but I'm also really talking about people meeting each other. And this is why we are trying to push from our side, for example, when it comes to town twinnings, when it comes to certain partnerships, exchange programs, that now with Brexit, instead of turning our backs, we do the exact opposite, and we try to, in any way possible, on any level possible, to put more efforts into keeping programs, into keeping partnerships, into keeping links also for the future. And I think that this is something that works best if it comes from both sides, so not only from the EU side, but also obviously from your side. But then I'm really hopeful that potentially not in the next 2, 3, 4, and maybe not even 10 years, but at some point there is going to be a moment when indeed Molly and me can cry again together, but then out of happiness and not out of sadness, when the UK will rejoin the European Union. And maybe I'll leave it at that. And now I'm very much looking forward to the debate.
Fantastic, that's great. Thank you so much, Terry. So we've got quite a few questions coming in. There was some that were pre-submitted, some that are quite similar as well coming in. So we're gonna, if we can, hopefully get through them quite quickly. There's one that was pre-submitted that we'll go to, and then we'll go to the ones that are coming in. If we could try and keep the answers fairly quick, I know we would all love to sit and listen to everyone speak for hours and hours, but we don't have that long, unfortunately. So very quickly, this first question, this was one that was from Pauline Allen. And perhaps this is something that Molly might want to speak to, because we do not have a fair voting system. If we want to remove the Tory government at the next election, we must seriously consider forming a political alliance with other parties. What is the view of the Green Party regarding this issue?
So the Green Party began the idea of a progressive alliance back in 2017, and it wasn't done, I would say, inside the party in the most inclusive way, but we were the party that sort of floated the idea of cooperating with other parties. And in that case, it was a bit of a kamikaze mission, I've got to say. We largely damaged ourselves, and the other parties used the fact that we tried to be cooperative to put pressure on more of our candidates to stand down. And in the end, we were left, trying to persuade any of our candidates to stand. So rather than joining us in cooperatively trying to stop the Tories, they used our attempt to be cooperative to attack us. By 2019, because the Brexit thing was so kind of fierce and important, all the other parties, apart from Labour and the DUP, did in some way cooperate. And we had Unite to Remain, and we had 10 seats under Unite to Remain. And although no seats because Labour sabotaged it, basically, no seats were actually saved because of that. It was still a proof of concept, which I think was quite powerful and important, because parties did stand aside for each other, because we thought Brexit was just so important for the country that we couldn't just have a normal competitive election. But obviously, you know, the DUP are an extremist party. One wouldn't expect them to cooperate, but Labour are, in my view, a self-serving party, and so they refuse to cooperate as well. So that leaves us in a very difficult position, because if we try and organise something, Labour will then again use it against us. And so I think what we have to do as a party is basically campaign incredibly hard for PR, and at the same time put pressure on Labour where it hurts, because unless we do that, you know, they're a party that responds to power. So we have to act powerfully. And that's why I stood in Stroud last time. In fact, they could never have won the seat here in Stroud, but it's a so-called Labour Tory marginal. So they expected us to stand aside for them, and we didn't. And I think we should really challenge them in places where it hurts until they change the electoral system. And I don't see that as antithetical to a progressive alliance, because we're still open to a progressive alliance. What we're not open to is lying down in the road and letting Labour ride over us. Even if they were doing a good job as opposition, why should we do that? But they're not. They're not opposing the Tories. And so I'm going to just take a deep breath and calm down now. But I would say as a party, we have to be open to a progressive alliance. But we should only do this if it's on the basis that the Parliament after the election looks like the way people voted. Because in 1997, the Liberal Democrats did this deal with Labour on the basis that Labour would introduce PR, and they just didn't do that. So I personally would not support a progressive alliance unless it involved us having a fair crack at the number of seats that our percentage of support would win for us. And then we can hold Labour to bringing in PR after the election, as can the Lib Dems. And yeah, we have to start negotiating that pretty soon. But before we do that, we've got to have our plans ready for the general election, and that's what we're doing now.
Fantastic. Thanks, Molly. Terry, Richard, did you have anything to say on that, or shall we?
I'll just come in quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to, I agree very much with what Molly said. I think it's very good. It may not be popular with everyone here, but I am of that view. I mean, the starting point really is that I just do not think Labour are going to be interested in a progressive alliance by the time of the next election. You know, everything so far that Keir Starmer's attitude has been to play very, very safe and cautious, and I don't think he's going to be in the mood for radical action like that against the wishes perhaps of people within his own party. So I just don't think it's going to happen. And therefore, and also, like Molly said, the Labour Party's policy at the moment on so many things, including Brexit in particular, is so poor that I would not be comfortable advocating people who potentially support the Green Party or other parties to vote for them. What the Labour Party need, in my view, is to feel some heat from their, you know, left pro-European internationalist flank, which is us, because the Conservative Party has certainly responded to heat from their flank, from UKIP, over the years. UKIP never really won a seat, but they caused a hell of a lot of consternation and movement from the Conservative Party. And I think the Green Party needs to do the same on the other side, not only to scare Labour and to get them to change their position, but also obviously for the future of the Green Party, we've got to be about winning. And that includes local elections, but also one day we want to start winning parliamentary seats. And we've done one in Brighton, we can do more. So, you know, I think we've got to be willing to fight.
Fantastic.
Can I just say that I mean, I have to admit that from the outside, the positions that Keir Starmer has been taking, especially on Brexit over the past weeks and months now, have been really hard to understand, also strategically, for what kind of position Labour is taking there. But I wanted to bring some good news, because actually you might have seen it. We recently had a breakthrough in the north of France, where there are going to be regional elections, and there is going to be a progressive alliance under the lead of the Greens. My colleague Karima Deli and the Socialists and the Left Party are going to join forces together. So I don't know, I found it interesting that, you know, there is an understanding of progressive alliance in different contexts, and this is a progressive alliance that I can certainly support, with Karima being the leading candidate for these elections.
Let me just chip in very quickly, because somebody in the chat has said, so another 5 years of Tory rule. And that's right, because Labour would prefer that than having to share power. So we have to make this case to Labour. And the good news here is that actually starting here in the Southwest, local Labour parties are passing motions in support of PR. And that's happening across the country. Make Votes Matter are making that happen. But what we mustn't do is then allow that to fail at the last point like it did in '97, and that's why we have to hang tough, because we need a proper democracy in this country. Labour won't do that unless they're under pressure from other parties. And so, you know, it's not because we need the Green Party to have more seats, although we do, it's because we need to have a proper democracy, and they need pressure in order to do that.
Brilliant. Fantastic, thanks for that. We've had a good question from Hanya Orshalik. I don't know if you want to say your question, or would you like me to read it out? Are you with us, Hanya?
Yeah, I'm here. Is it okay, I'm just going to try to think what question that was. It was about inspiring young people. So it's actually really difficult to get young people to feel the kind of fury that they should be feeling. I mean, all of the three speakers today have given a really strong case for why young people have been just totally unrepresented completely in our politics for years now, and they should be furious, and they're not. I think it's partly because they don't know, really, they don't know the full impact of Brexit on themselves and on their lives. So really, what can we do to actually inform them of what's actually happening, and then to inspire them to be angry?
Thanks, Hanya. Who would like to take that question? No one. Brilliant.
Yeah, I can start if you want.
You
Oh,
can't.
Richard, go ahead.
Richard and I can't start because we're not young. So Terry has to start.
Well, you know what? If I speak to school classes, I think it can be debated whether they consider me as being a young person. But no, I think that a lot of young people are actually furious, but maybe they don't express it, or maybe they don't voice it in a way that it actually reaches also us as parliamentarians, for example. I think this is really the barrier that has to be broken down. And I think that this is not only something that applies to the UK, but I think that's a problem that we are facing across societies. And for me, one of the things, and actually, this is also a lesson learned from the Brexit referendum a little bit, and Molly and me have discussed it many times. One of the things that I felt was maybe a weakness on our side, or the Remain side, was that there was a very sort of rational argument made. You know, it was just from an economic point of view stupid to leave the European Union, and then this was kind of like the tone that was reigning the whole campaign. You know, basically it's wrong because of these rational arguments. And what I felt the other side was maybe doing better is to make an argument that much more appealed to maybe an emotional side of people, that, you know, there was this thing about independence, freedom, taking back control. And this was, I think, in a way, strategically in this referendum situation and in the campaign. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't have rational arguments. We should absolutely have rational arguments. But, you know, we should also see that in order to make successful campaigns and to bring people together, to mobilize people, to also use more emotional arguments, or more arguments that might not be, you know, like from that might not be the most technocratic case to be made. And I think that this is very often also true for young people, that, you know, explaining in a long sermon why the European Union brings economic advantages to the UK is probably not going to mobilize a lot of them. But speaking about freedom of movement, speaking about representation, speaking about other issues, and also doing it in a maybe non-institutional politician way, that is something that I think we need to learn to do better, and we need to try to engage in that way. But then I think there is a lot of potential to tap in, because I think a lot of people, especially young people, actually see the downsides and the difficulties that are there right now.
Brilliant, fantastic. Does anyone else want to come in on this, Molly or Richard? You don't have to, of course, you don't have to speak to everything.
My initial reaction to Hanya's question was I was going to turn it straight round and point it back at Hanya, because Hanya is very well placed to answer her own question. I mean, I think it needs to be led by people like Hanya. We've got Julius from Young European Movement on the call as well. And Marcus, yourself, you know, you're the face of youth and pro-European youth, and you're the people who can communicate with other young people. And I would strongly encourage you to, you know, to do it. And I know you can.
I would slightly push back against what you said, Hanya, because I think young people are incredibly mobilized and political. They're just not doing it in the same kind of way as people used to do it before. But, you know, on climate, for example, young people are very mobilized. And I find them not just like, they're not just shouting empty slogans, they're incredibly well informed and really well motivated. So, you know, I'm not going to be carrying on in this game for very long. And when I look ahead, I feel incredibly optimistic, actually, because the young people I see coming into their power now seem to me much more competent than the people of my generation. And yeah, I have a lot of confidence in their ability, in your ability to make much better political decisions than have been made. And I see my job as holding democracy there. And I think we all have to defend democracy, because younger people have much more progressive views across a whole range of social and economic issues, of which, you know, the Brexit issue and internationalism generally is just one example. So I think, you know, you won't get a lot of young people maybe to come to a public meeting, but I think on their own way, they are very mobilized and well informed.
Thanks, Molly. We've got loads of great questions coming in. I'm really sorry we're not probably going to be able to get to very many more of them. It's, you know, we've not got long left now already. We've got a question from Tim Goddard. I don't know if you want to say your question, Tim, or would you like me to read it out?
Can do. Yeah, hi everyone. It's just about the media. Like, I know there's some papers we're never going to get into, but the media really aren't covering the absolutely atrocious consequences of, you know, all what's already happened. Is there any way that we can get the media to cover the consequences of Brexit more?
Can I jump in, Marcus?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm very keen to talk about this. It's absolutely right. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier today that the real damage of Brexit is not getting enough coverage at the moment. We had like a 40% decline in exports in January, which has been documented. It's disastrous, really disastrous. And, you know, you get someone like David Frost says in the House of Lords, oh, it was 40% down in January, but everything was fine again by the 1st of February. So don't worry about it. I mean, and that's accepted by the media. It's not going to be good. It's terrible, and the British public need to be made aware of how terrible it is. And so we're not going to get any help from the media, really. We're going to have to force the issue ourselves using social media and using making as much noise as we can. And the thing I wanted to say was that today, Leeds for Europe had 3 letters in the Yorkshire Evening Post, some of them under the radar, but there's Debs here. She wrote one of the letters. Who was the other one? Was it Jazz? I mean, and I had one, and we filled the letters page of the Yorkshire Evening Post, making these sorts of arguments about, you know, about trade and so on. So that is one way you can do it, is to force yourself into the media. Apart from otherwise buying a newspaper group and running it ourselves, we're stuck with what we've got, and we just got to. But it does absolutely need to be raised. Because it's not getting the coverage it needs at this moment.
Can I chip in, Marcus?
Go for it.
So this is my day job now on behalf of the Green Party, trying to get us more media coverage. And so it's very interesting, I would say, and it's much harder now than it was before I became an MEP. And I think that we're seeing a serious deterioration in terms of the broadcasters respecting of their legal requirement to give fair and unbiased coverage. And we're now seeing the government putting very dangerous people both at the head of Ofcom and the Information Commission and the Electoral Commission. So, you know, this is part of what I'm saying about the importance of defending democracy. They are making the sort of moves that we're seeing in Hungary, the sort of moves that you expect to see from an authoritarian regime to control our media environment. But I would say that there's a sense in which that also works against them, because if you have the BBC there and it very mildly and gently sort of tells people what you want them to think, then people like trust Auntie Beeb, right? That's where we were 10 or 15 years ago. But now most people realise that the BBC is just Pravda and a mouthpiece of the government, and they don't trust it anymore. So that's kind of dangerous, but at the same time, it's a more direct, it's a more obvious form of propaganda, I would say, and that makes it easier to challenge. So the Green Party has extremely good media policy, and it says that nobody should be able to own more than 20% of the important outlets of broadcast and print, and nobody can own anything unless they're resident here and a taxpayer. So almost everything in our media universe would just be up for grabs if our policy was introduced. And if you think about the people that really drove Brexit, you know, we had the Barclay Brothers stable of the Telegraph and the Spectator. We had the Murdoch empire. We had Rothermere, who's the son or grandson of the guy that supported Hitler in the 30s. You know, what an odious bunch they were. And that was why it happened. So I mean, this is the heart of the problem. I agree. But we are seeing some positive signs. Somebody mentioned in the chat about Sussex bylines. There are a few of these new media coming up now. We've got West Country bylines. You've got Yorkshire bylines. You've got the Yorkshire Post, which is a great paper, I think. We've got the New European. And I don't want us to end up in just a bubble where we agree with ourselves. But I do think, you know, we need to campaign heavily on this issue. It's very important. And of course, we've always called for Leveson 2. So Leveson 1 was just like feeling sorry for people. Leveson 2 was addressing what had gone wrong with the cesspit of our media. And of course, as soon as the Tories came in, Leveson 2 was abolished. But, you know, as Greens, we're thoroughly committed to wholesale media reform. You can't have a democracy if you don't have free press. Free press doesn't mean if you've got enough money, you can say what you like and other people have to read it. Free press means everybody's view is represented, freedom of speech. It's not freedom of speech if you can't get your view out because of who owns the media. It's the opposite of freedom of speech.
Fantastic. Did you want to come in on this, Terry? No. Fantastic.
I can agree with what Richard and Molly said.
We've not got very long left. Perhaps someone sent in a question. I'm just trying to find it now, but perhaps if Terry, you could take this one on your own very, very quickly before we finish up. It was something along the lines of, I'm going to have to paraphrase, sorry. But how has Brexit affected the pro-European and or Eurosceptic views within the rest of Europe and the rest of the EU?
Well, I mean, to cut a long story short, I think you all know that the next Eurobarometer after Brexit in all other EU member states, the support of the European Union, membership of the European Union went through the roof. So Brexit is such a disaster. And, you know, maybe it's not reported that much inside of the UK, but it's very much reported in the rest of the, in the European Union. So, I mean, I think that really Brexit has really made everybody else lose the appetite for leaving the European Union. And, you know, I know that Farage and also even some Tories are saying this is different and the European Union is going to fall apart. I think that there are a lot of issues that we have to address inside of the European Union. Molly was just talking about Hungary. We have the situation in Poland, and we also have an authoritarian wave in the European Union, and I would say globally. So these issues are not isolated issues for the UK. But I think if Brexit has done one thing, it has actually brought the rest of the European Union much closer together, and it has shown people what kind of advantages it brings to be part of the European Union. And this is not, you know, like middle class people, educated, blah, blah, blah. When I go back to my family, I come from a very modest background. Since Brexit, you know, beforehand they were all like, yeah, but what are you really doing in Brussels, whatever. And now everybody is, oh my God, let's never do what the UK did, and let's try to keep the European Union together. So I think actually Euroscepticism due to Brexit has gone down, and even parties like the Front National, so the extreme right in France, they are not asking for leaving the European Union anymore because they have seen that it's not something that you can win elections with. So actually, interestingly, ironically, Brexit has become one of the arguments for the European Union in the rest of the EU.
Fantastic. As Richard said in the chat, that's probably the only major benefit of Brexit. Glad we could be of service in some sense. It's gone really, really quick tonight, so it would have been great to have longer and ask a lot more questions. We had loads of questions coming through, but thank you so much everyone for coming. Thank you, Richard, Molly, Terry, for joining us. It was really fantastic. There's a few things we just need to talk about. We've got Julius with us. If he's going to speak, I believe, very, very quickly. If we could make it really, really quick, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you briefly. My name is Julius. I'm the president of the Young European Movement UK. We are the youth organization of the European Movement, which is a co-host of this event, and we are also the UK section of the largest political youth organization of Europe called JEF Europe, or the Young Federalists Europe. What are we working on? Well, obviously, we're working on the effects that Brexit has. We are specifically working on this question of how to get young people involved, how to fight apathy, how to fight huge disappointment. And frankly, I've actually been in 2 meetings today with Hania, and so we do really face that reality on a daily basis, that we face young people who are maybe not happy with Brexit, but who also don't want to actively take a lead on that. So this is why I'm reaching out to you. If you want to get involved with us, I'm quickly gonna pop in some links into the chat because I don't have the time to present what we are working on at the moment. So you can check that out. We are basically working on Erasmus. We are designing an advocacy coalition and an advocacy pressure group. We are working on a project which is called the Brexit Reality Portraits, where we want to, especially also with an Erasmus edition, but also generally, where we want to show the effects of Brexit and go beyond the sort of bemoaning and the sort of negative narrative, but really understand both sides of the whole thing. Because I think without understanding both sides, we will also never manage to sort of bridge this gap between the pro-Europeans and the anti-Europeans. We are also reviving branches all over the place. So if you want to start your own branch, you are more than welcome. The doors are more than open. And yeah, I'm going to probably leave it there and also be available for any questions that you have. And I'm also going to put my email into the chat. But basically, the fact that you signed up to this call and that you joined it shows that you are interested in some way. One thing I should add, we are non-partisan. So we are partisan in the way that we are pro-European, but we are not partisan in the sense that we don't endorse or align with any particular party. However, we are open to people working with us and volunteering with us if you are affiliated with a party. So that is, there is no worry about being associated or working with the Young Greens and with the European movement, because we also have other parties present. And actually we have all parties present except for the right wing. Yeah, will not be very surprising to you to hear that. But yeah, if you would like to get involved with us, then please do. Thank you. Fantastic.
Thanks so much, Julius. Yeah, please do join the European movement. I think Julius is hopefully going to put some links in. I've got a few links for you as well. If it's if you don't mind, I'm gonna put some words in your mouth. We've got a click to tweet here. If you click that link that I've just put in the chat, it will take you to a pre-filled tweet. So you can do that and tweet it out. If you want to change it, of course, please feel free. It just says that we've had a great time at this brilliant event that was brilliant and great, stuff like that. That would be fantastic. And there's also a link there to another event that's happening tomorrow, which will be really fantastic. I'll pop it in the chat again there for you. There's this event that I would encourage everyone to sign up for that's happening tomorrow night with Amelia Womack, hopefully, if she's able to be available for this, and it's also with Billy Lund from the Subways. It's talking about the arts and how it's called COVID Cuts and how we save the arts. Talking a little bit about sort of what's going on with music and creative arts in general. That would be fantastic. I'm sure everyone would really enjoy that. And we've got another one as well for the people in the Green Party. There's a link I've just popped in there for Sean's campaign launch. Sean Berry, co-leader of the Green Party and our candidate for Mayor of London, has an event there, which is at some point, I can't remember when, but the link's in the chat so you can sign up for it. I think we've got through everything. Fantastic, with 1 minute left. Thanks everyone again so much for joining. Really appreciate it. Molly's had to go, but thank you so much to Molly. Thank you for Terry. Really fantastic that you've been able to join, and for Richard as well. I'm sorry we didn't get to everyone's questions, but next time. Thank you so much everyone. If anyone does want to hang around and has any other questions perhaps for Julius or for anyone, that's fine. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Let's keep in touch. And I'll come to Leeds.
Absolutely.
do.
Please do.
Thank you, Terry.
Great. Thanks.
Anytime.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.